BYU off to a nice 3-0 start, looking for 4 straight to start the season for the first time since 2008. Mark Rogers TV looking forward to this challenging game in Provo between a revitalized Virginia program possibly taking on BYU. We bring in Mitch Harper of Lawless Republic. This is where we get our BYU information. We get it from the best. Mitch, thanks so much for joining us. Before we look ahead to Virginia, I want to get your take on the Houston game because I watched most of the game. I was doing a little NFL college football flipping back and forth, and you guys get off to a great start. It looks like it would be a fairly comfortable win. I think it was 16-0. Might have went to 23-0. Taysom Hill doing his thing, 200 passing, 160 on the ground, but made some mistakes and let Houston back in the game. So, Mitch, thanks for joining us, and just give us your take on Houston first.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It's been far too long. I was hoping to do it last week, but I became too ill, so I was really sick last week. But no, BYU, though, looking pretty good. I think a lot of people were kind of surprised by the way that game played out against Houston, because I think a lot of people thought BYU was going to just crush Houston. I mean, how they played against Texas, you got to think, Houston's not going to be as good as Texas. As blasphemous as this may sound, I think Houston might have more skill talent than Texas does. So I think they're a little bit better than we were expecting. But BYU, 33-25 win. I don't think it was ever in doubt. They got up 23-0. I think a lot of crazy turnovers. The deep Hail Mary before the half against for Houston. They got a touchdown there, and then they capitalized on some turnovers. Those were probably points, about 10 to 14 points, that usually BYU on most nights doesn't give up. If you take those away, it's probably a runaway win like many thought. So I think ultimately BYU 3-0, and they're 3-0 for the first time since 2008, and only the third time in 21 years. BYU is a program that has been, they've played tough schedules. And they've always been, someone knocking on the door trying to get respect. But they've never really got to this threshold very often. 30 years ago this year they had the 1984 National Championship. A lot of folks around here are starting to think maybe, hey, can BYU have another special run? Schedule sets up pretty nicely. Going into this matchup against Virginia, I think it's a good opportunity for BYU to maybe make a statement nationally that, hey, Power 5 team comes into Provo, this is BYU. They're not going to take any prisoners, I guess you could say. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup this week against Virginia.
Hey, Mitch, count me guilty. I was one of those who thought, BYU just ripped Texas, and there's no way that Texas isn't better than Houston, even though, Houston produces the skilled players, and we know that Texas is down. I also looked at that Texas San Antonio score against Houston a few weeks earlier, as well as the Cougars lost that game. So I was guilty of chalking that one up as an automatic win as well. Bronco Mendenhall, by the way, made some comments you're very well aware of this week, just in regards to being questioned about the team's somewhat careless play on offense, committing 3 turnovers in the Houston game. He really likes the way that the team is aggressive, very tough, playing physical football, and he doesn't want to take that away from the team. Sure, take care of the football, it's very important, but he loves how this team's approaching the game.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the toughest defenses I think BYU has had under his tenure. I mean, this is his Broncos' 10th year. It's his. It was kind of a unique story going into this year where Bronco relinquished the defensive coordinator role, where he was actually calling plays. He's kind of pulled away. He's kind of more of an overseer of everything. He wants to be more part of the offense. So Nick Howell stepped in as defensive coordinator, calling the plays, and this defense has been really. I think the penalties, BYU can accept when they're physical, penalties where you don't want to, the dumb penalties where it's a false start. You're not seeing that. You're seeing penalties where it's a personal foul or holding because you're playing too hard. And I think Bronco Mendenhall and this team like that. One of the things a lot of people were saying, it seemed like on Twitter after that Houston game was, man, this BYU team is kind of a nasty bunch in a way. Safety Craig Bills, he's a senior, number 20. He was laying a lot of hard hits. I know first play out of the gates against Houston, he had a huge hit on one of Houston's wide receivers. So BYU, they want to lay the lumber. I mean, and then this team really has a chip on their shoulder. A lot of things from the offseason where BYU was kind of one of the interesting storylines in college football this offseason because they, obviously this new era of the college football playoff, the groups of fives, the Power Five. BYU isn't a group of five, and they, as Bronco Mendenhall likes to say, they haven't been tapped on the head with a magic wand and told they're a Power Five. They're right in the middle. And they've really kind of taken on this role to try to be maybe like this underdog that knocks down the system and wants to shatter the system and make a name for themselves. They're really excited about that. And I think also the ACC angle where the ACC and SEC told BYU and said, hey, we're going to schedule Power 5 teams. You're not going to fit under that criteria. BYU never directly addressed that, at least coaches and players, but you go through Twitter and you see these comments in the media kind of subtweeting these comments. It kind of irked them, because BYU is a proud, storied program that feels they are an elite program. They've historically always been a team that wins football games. Over the last 42 years, they've won on average 8 wins a season. And, to be told that you're not good enough when clearly they feel that they're better than the likes of Wake Forest or even a Virginia. I mean, to be told that they're inferior to those, it's kind of irked BYU, and they've really kind of turned up the intensity this season. I think it's played out so far on the field, with how they've been playing, the physicality. Many folks around here haven't seen this type of play from BYU, and I think it just kind of, again, is going to boil over into this Virginia game where this is a huge game for BYU to make a mark nationally. Not very often does BYU get ESPN on a Saturday. Now, BYU obviously has the ESPN contract where as an independent, but they're usually like on a weeknight, Thursday, Friday night games. People kind of always associate with those crazy weeknight games. This week they got a Saturday afternoon ESPN. They haven't had that since 2004 when they played USC. How many Saturday games on national ESPN network does BYU get? So they're really looking forward to this opportunity.
Mitch, before we look at Virginia, let's stay on this theme here, the college football playoffs and BYU being in a very unique situation because it used to always be the BCS conference teams and Notre Dame. You would always see that phrase when writers would talk about the way things were setting up for a BCS championship game, who the contenders were, the BCS conferences and Notre Dame, or even within the bowl structure. It was, right. This is slotted for the Big Ten and the SEC or the Big Ten and Notre Dame. Always conditions given to Notre Dame. When you used to look at the standings, and I'm probably going back to newspaper days, you'd see independents and you'd see tons of them. Now everybody's joined conferences. Army, Navy, they're kind of in a different class and not a national contender. Then you've got Notre Dame and BYU. And again, the concession given to Notre Dame. BYU's in a very, if they keep playing good football, it's a good position, but they have to continue to play winning football. But they're in an interesting position being kind of out there by themselves with Notre Dame, but Notre Dame already given that concession.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're really the only true independent program left. I mean, Notre Dame, had they just stayed as a true independent and not had the ACC agreement, they don't have access to the Orange Bowl every so many years with the ACC tie-in. They would have been in BYU's predicament. So they had to start running to a league. And obviously they're still an independent, and programs or leagues will kind of cave to Notre Dame. But BYU, they don't have that luxury, because of geography and because of other factors over the years. BYU, again, hasn't been, blessed to be in a Power 5. I think it'll eventually happen, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon because I think the realignment phase right now is over for a foreseeable future. So BYU's going to grind it out as an independent. They've proven that they can get good football games, good made-for-TV football games, and ESPN's a huge part of that. But BYU really is just in a weird situation because it's like they could go undefeated this year and they could still be left out of the playoff. They could be left out of even the New Year's Day 6 Bowls games. You could see, 12-0 BYU go to the Miami Beach Bowl, and then 11-1, 10-2 East Carolina goes to the Fiesta Bowl because the group of 5 has that guaranteed tie-in with one of those New Year's Day 6. And so it's very an interesting predicament for BYU because they really enjoy independence. Like it was really a situation where when it was announced in 2010, it was kind of a made for BYU. It's just independence. They're really a unique program that doesn't really mesh with like state-owned schools, and they're just really their own unique brand, kind of like a Notre Dame, not to the grandest extent in terms of prestige over the course of hundreds of years, but BYU had that unique niche with the LDS Church and Mormon religion. And so independence was a great fit, but how much college football has changed since when they announced independence in 2010 to today? It's just night and day difference. I mean, now they have to get in a league. Again, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think it's going to be about maybe 10 to 12 years after the college football playoff era kind of ends, and maybe the Big 12 says, we need 12 teams. Maybe BYU brings enough to the table in terms of TV dollars that they do give these programs more. Because you look at the Big 12 right now, they got 10 members, and they're making big-time money. I mean, Iowa State making more than Alabama in TV revenue. It's just like they don't want to lose that cut. They don't want to lose that $23.5 million. Can BYU increase the take instead of taking away? And I think that's yet to be seen. Whereas right now, though, it is a good predicament to be in as an independent because it's better to be independent than be a group of five. Because it's almost like the group of five situation is almost like one step above the FCS level, really, in terms of branding, and because they're not that. But people look at BYU, I think, nationally too. A lot of people I know went to the Texas game, and folks out there they're like, yeah, I mean BYU is like they're a great program. They've done great things. They've always given Texas problems. People look at BYU. I think a lot have that view nationally, like yeah, that's a good football program, but they don't know enough about them to say yeah they're like in the same breath as programs in the SEC or Oklahoma's or Texas. Not that they are, but people look at them and say that's a good football program. They don't look at them in the same breath as like New Mexico or Colorado State, like they were lumped in with so many years before. But being independent poses a lot of interesting challenges. They love the exposure that it comes with TV. I mean, 5 out of the first 6 games are on ESPN networks. That's the only program in the country that can say that in their first 6 games. But it's just no guarantees, though, at the end of the tunnel. You don't have any guarantee. You're not making anywhere near as much money as the Power 5. And money is just separating the powers that be. I mean, it's an arms race. And can BYU honestly keep up and have access to the end results? That's still yet to be seen.
You started to go down the road of this season, just looking at this season and the chances of getting into the 4-team college football playoff. So it's almost a question more so what does everybody else have to do or not do for you, Mitch, rather than what BYU has to do, because it's pretty obvious, go undefeated. So looking at the national landscape, how do you think the pieces would have to fall into place to get BYU into the Final Four?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the playoff this year, we don't know the approach behind us. Like, is the human element going to be better than the computers? I honestly, it might sound crazy, coming from someone that covers a non-BCS program, but the BCS really was kind of a unique thing that I think accomplished a lot in college football. You think about the interest and the excitement. The BCS did a lot for college football, and more times than not, always got the best teams right. A lot of it, people didn't like the computer element. Now the humans are into the mix. The selection committee, how will they view a 12-0 BYU compared to a 1-loss, Power 5 school? I think, obviously, a lot of teams probably have 2 losses. I think, honestly, a lot of teams kind of drop a lot of games. It helps that the Big Ten, their image is kind of hindered already. People saying, Big Ten won't have any teams. I just don't. I think the problem for BYU is that their schedule, they don't have the names. A lot of things with college football is perception, and schedule just doesn't have the image of a powerful slate. Even though Central Florida and Boise State have been very successful programs nationally, winning BCS bowl games, winning big-time games, they just don't have that cachet. Like last year, BYU faced Notre Dame, Wisconsin. They faced a lot of great teams. This year just doesn't have that name recognition, because at the end of the day, as whatever Texas becomes this year, it's still, wow, BYU beat Texas, 41-7 in Austin. Like, that holds some clout to people, regardless of what Texas does. So yeah, it's just tough. I think BYU's best shot, realistically, I think, is to get to the New Year's Day 6, because it's going to be hard to stop an undefeated BYU from being in one of those at-large spots. I know the Fiesta Bowl, I want to say, has 2 at-large spots. I mean, Arizona to Provo, Utah, not very far. BYU fans would be jonesing at the chance to go down there. They'd probably bring 50,000 or more. I mean, there's tons of BYU fans, too, in the Arizona region. They would pack the house. The Fiesta Bowl would be jumping for joy, I think, to get a program like BYU, just because of their poor attendance over the past few years, packed the house. I think that's BYU's ultimate goal. I think Bronco Mendenhall has always said that in order to crack the playoff, in his opinion, BYU will have to go undefeated 2 straight years. So I think this year can maybe lay the foundation for a lot of buzz for BYU nationally next season, when you have maybe a senior in Taysom Hill coming back, if he doesn't go to the NFL, a senior running back in Jamal Williams, experienced offensive line, and then a schedule in 2015 that has Nebraska, UCLA, Michigan, Boise State all in month 1. You win that slate, you're going to be hard-pressed to ignore that team from going to the college football playoffs. So I think it's going to take 2 straight years of almost going undefeated for BYU to have a legitimate shot, crack the thing.
No, that's a really interesting point that he made right there about going undefeated back-to-back years. For as much as I think some of us would like to think that these years are looked at in vacuums, they're just simply not. That's why the SEC is given a pass, and they've earned it to a certain extent. At the same time, it's a separate year, but the past plays into the way teams are evaluated in conferences. And you bring up Central Florida and Boise State. Now, if Boise State was the Boise State of 5 years ago, that win would be much bigger. They're still a decent program, but coming off 8-5 and losing to Ole Miss by a big score. Central Florida, the same thing. They got trashed by Missouri. They've already lost to Penn State, so you're not getting any help there. And again, Texas, brings name brand football and as much as anybody, and played very well against UCLA, but they're looking like a 7-5 type team right now. So Virginia, do you know anything about the Cavaliers? I know they're playing 2 quarterbacks. I know that they looked really good against UCLA. They've got athletes flying all over the place on defense because they've recruited pretty well, and then they come up with this big upset against Louisville, and that's the first win they've come up with versus an FBS team since, I think you remember the last one.
That's right. I do remember that game. That's one of those losses. Man, folks around here, it's one of those games last year BYU lost in the season opener. I don't know if for those that don't remember this game or know what happened, BYU opened the 2013 season, lost at Virginia 19-16. It had a huge weather delay, like 2 hours long. Slippery fields, terrible field condition, just a mess, really. And it's one of those games that a lot of folks around here consider one of the worst losses in BYU football history, and a lot of that gets added on because of what Virginia became. But you kind of saw that Virginia was a bad football team last year in week 1. Like, it was just a bad loss, and BYU always having high expectations. It was, and being an independent where losing one game your season in a way is kind of just crushed nationally. It was just a devastating loss that I think put a sour taste and just put a sour tone on the entire season for BYU. They beat Texas the week after, but it was like, yeah, you beat Texas, but you lost to Virginia, and it's just like, that's a bad football team. But this year's Virginia team much better, and you mentioned it. Their recruiting class is Mike London. He's been on the hot seat this year, and he's probably going to remain there until they keep winning some more of these games like they did against Virginia or Louisville. But their recruiting classes have been great. I mean, top 25 classes. I mean, he's kind of cornered the Washington D.C. London has, and Virginia and BYU have a history. They're going to play more games coming up in the future. The two ADs really respect one another. Virginia's AD has even said he doesn't really agree with the ACC, saying that BYU isn't a Power 5 team because he feels that they are, and that's why they schedule them. But Virginia, in terms of personnel, I look at this game and I think there's just when it comes to the Cavaliers. They're just kind of a sound football team. They don't have many. Like, so you look at Taysom Hill for BYU, and he just pops off the page. You got to stop that guy. There's no one that pops off the page for me for Virginia, but they're just, I think, much improved. They're going to be more competitive. Will they get to the bowl game? I think this is kind of like the linchpin, game for them. If they win this, you're talking maybe 6-7 wins. It saves London's job, and Virginia might get back to some being relevant. Because I think back when I think Virginia football, I always think George Welsh. BYU and Virginia had an All-American Bowl back in '87. Lavelle and Welsh, and Virginia and BYU was a good matchup, and they had another matchup in the late '90s, 1999, made for ESPN. Thomas Jones, Rob Morris, 2000. And there's just a good BYU Virginia games over the years, and Virginia is a program though that I think just a Power 5 program, in terms of their conference affiliation. I think that just gets folks around here excited at the opportunity, because as an independent, BYU doesn't get many chances to schedule or to get teams from the Power 5 leagues to come to Provo, as much. BYU is in a tough predicament, as an independent. They're still battling to get quality home games as a football independent, a program from a P5 league cross country to just do a home and home, not a 2-for-1, not a 3-for-1, just a home and home. I think that's, it's important, and I think this is a game that I think BYU overall, I think it's a better team. I think they got better talent, but I think turnovers could keep it close, kind of like the Houston game. So BYU has to clean things up, but I think if they do have those turnovers, it could be more costly, because I think Virginia has more talent than Houston does, especially in the trenches. I just think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be, but I think BYU ultimately pulls away, and I think BYU wins by 2 touchdowns on this one. I think BYU gets it done. I think they move on to 4-0.
I think you're right on the Vegas line, from what I understand, Mitch. It's about a 2-touchdown game. I think you're probably aware of that. And you bring up Virginia in regards to the recruiting. I think what you're going to see for people that haven't watched Virginia play, for people out there, is because of what the recruiting's been, because they have that base in Virginia and D.C. and also in the South, is you're going to see certain players that are not NFL ready from a skill standpoint, but they look the part. They look good. The outside linebackers, the defensive ends that look like NFL players, but then they're just really so weak in certain areas. You're going to see quarterbacks just miss wide open receivers. You're going to see receivers that are athletes, but they don't run good routes. They drop passes. You're just going to see some ugly football, but you're going to see some pretty darn good-looking athletes out there doing it. So they're an interesting program right now, and Mike London obviously needs some more big wins.
That is one thing with BYU. More times than not, you just pass the eye test. BYU probably never going to win that battle. I mean, BYU gets off the bus, and people probably see they see guys like just Taysom Hill. I mean, Taysom's he's pretty impressive athlete, but you see BYU off the bus, and more times than not, teams are going to go, these guys are ranked. These are the undefeated, high octane, like, these guys aren't anything impressive. But then they get on the field, and it's just like, wow, these guys play some hard-hitting football, and Virginia does have impressive-looking athletes. I mean, Eli Harold, that guy, he's the one that pops off the page. I've been watching some Virginia games, obviously the UCLA and Louisville, and he was wrecking havoc all last year for BYU. So he's going to be someone to game plan at defensive end for BYU to focus on this week. But yeah, you talk about getting off the bus. Yeah, that's always just something that's funny when you mention that, because BYU just never wins that battle more than not.
Well, that's the battle that doesn't count. So,
yeah,
Mitch Harper, Lawless Republic, with us. Hey, Mitch, hopefully we can do it down the line, and hopefully you keep knocking out those W's, and becomes even more interesting, the conversation, as we get close to college football playoff time, and sizing up those bowl games and seeing where they land.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. There's not a better time of the year. I get sad at the thought that we're already 3 games in, and 25% of the season's already over. It just kind of makes me depressed. I remember we were talking back in May, and the off season just went so long, and already we're at week 4 where is the time going? College football season takes so long to get here, and then it just goes fast in the blink of an eye. But yeah, love coming on. Looking forward to talking more and breaking down more college football as always.
Yep, shortest season in sports. NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, NFL, all a lot longer. So we got to savor it when it's here. All right, Mitch, thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it, man.
No problem.